The phone rang at exactly midnight. A trembling voice from the hospital said, "Sir, your son has been rushed into emergency surgery. You need to come now." 20 minutes later, as I stepped into the ICU corridor, a young nurse suddenly grabbed my arm and pulled me into a storage room. Her face had gone completely pale. She shoved a thick envelope into my hands and whispered, "Take the kids and disappear tonight. Don't tell anyone where you're going." The moment I opened the envelope and saw what was inside, all the color drained from my face. Welcome back to Revenge Dad. Before we continue, drop a quick comment for me. What are you doing while you listen? Driving, working, just relaxing? I read every single comment, and your presence here truly matters. Quick note, this story includes a few fictional elements to emphasize the lesson. What matters most is the message it carries. The phone rang at exactly midnight, the kind of hour when calls only bring news of death. I didn't turn on the lights. 20 years in the Army Corps of Engineers, and I still can't shake the habit. Assess in darkness first. The glowing screen read, Harborview Medical Center. Mr. Cole, a woman's voice, professional but strained. This is Harborview Emergency. Your son Derek has been in a serious car accident on I-5. He's in emergency surgery now, critical condition. I sat up, feet on the cold hardwood floor. 60 years old, and my first thought was still tactical. Who else knows? What happened? A single vehicle collision. We'll have more information when you arrive. I see you, third floor. She hung up before I could ask the question forming in my mind. They called me. Not Marlene, not his wife. That was the first thing that didn't make sense. I dressed in the dark jeans flannel shirt work boots, the kind of clothes that let you move if you need to. My hands didn't shake. Retired mechanical engineer widower, living alone in a suburban Seattle rental since my wife passed 3 years ago. I visit my grandchildren Silas and Lark every weekend with the quiet precision of a man who trusts physics more than promises. But tonight, physics had nothing to do with the ice forming in my chest. The drive to Harborview took 20 minutes through November rain that hammered my windshield like it was trying to tell me something. I kept both hands on the wheel of my Ford F-150 and my speed 5 under the limit. Panic is what gets people killed. The discipline holds even when your son, your only child, is on an operating table. Derek, 32 years old, CEO of some capital management firm I barely understood. We drifted apart after he married Marlene, after the grandchildren came. He'd moved into that smart home in Bellevue with more technology than the engineering projects I used to run. Marlene was his second wife. The boy's biological mother had remarried and moved to Tacoma 2 years after the divorce. That part never changed. I saw Silas and Lark every weekend regardless. That part never changed. And sitting in that truck with rain blurring the taillights ahead of me, I couldn't remember the last real conversation we'd had. Not about work or the kids or the weather, about anything that mattered. That thought sat in my chest like a stone. Harborview's parking garage was half empty at 12:30 in the morning. I took the elevator to the third floor ICU, the antiseptic smell hitting me before the doors fully opened. White lights, beige walls. That particular silence of a hospital at night, punctuated by distant monitors and hushed voices. I walked toward the ICU reception desk, rehearsing the words. "I'm Martin Cole, my son Derek." "Mr. Cole." I turned. A young woman in scrubs, late 20s dark hair, pulled back hospital badge reading Santos S. Night Nurse. But her eyes moved the way accountants move, scanning cataloging, missing nothing. She wasn't at the desk. She was standing in the corridor 10 feet from a supply closet, looking at me with eyes that were too wide. "You need to come with me," she said quietly. "Now?" She didn't wait for an answer. She opened the supply closet door and stepped inside. I followed on instinct, the kind of instinct that kept me alive when I was younger and doing more dangerous work than designing water treatment systems. She locked the door from the inside. You need to understand something. When a nurse locks a supply closet door from the inside at 12:40 in the morning, you listen. Her hands were shaking as she pulled a thick envelope from under her scrubs and thrust it into my hands. Inside a black USB drive and a handwritten note on torn paper. Watch order, _of_. Priority, .txt first. She said, voice barely above a whisper. "Take the kids and run, right now." I looked at the USB, 4 gigabytes according to the label. "What is this?" "Your son isn't in an accident," she said. Her eyes met mine, and I saw something I'd seen before in combat engineers who'd reached their breaking point. He's staging it, and if you stay here, you'll be the next corpse. The supply closet smelled like disinfectant and fear. Shelves of gauze and tubing surrounded us. Fluorescent light buzzed overhead. And this woman, Saskia Santos, 28 years old, according to her badge, someone who'd worked ICU. Night shifts long enough to know what genuine emergencies looked like, was trembling. "Who are you?" I asked. "Someone who knows what your son is capable of," she said. "I've been watching him for 2 years. He has leverage on me, a record error that could destroy my license. He made me feed him patient information, flag certain admissions, look the other way. But this," she gestured at the USB in my hand. "This is different. He's escalating. And you're the target." "Why, I don't know all of it," she said. "But I know enough. That drive has files he doesn't know I copied. Financial records, names, a priority list." Her voice cracked. "Your name is on it." I looked at her face. No acting, no performance. Only genuine fear, the fear of someone who decided they couldn't retreat any further. "Where is Derek right now?" I asked. "Discharged himself from the ER an hour ago," she said. "Walked out. No surgery, no accident. He set the scene and left." The USB felt terrifyingly light in my palm. 4 gigabytes. I didn't know what was on it. Insurance fraud, financial schemes, evidence of crimes I couldn't yet imagine. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty: this woman wouldn't risk her career, her license, her life for something small. My son, the boy I taught to calculate load-bearing stress and read construction blueprints, the man I barely recognized anymore. "Thank you," I said. Saskia nodded, once unlocked the door, and stepped back into the corridor without another word. Professional mask back in place. Just another night nurse finishing her shift. I stood alone in that supply closet at 12:47 in the morning, holding a USB drive that weighed almost nothing, and somehow, everything. Through the door, I could hear the distant beep of monitors, the soft voices of medical staff, who had no idea what had just happened. Saskia's eyes were still burned into my memory, wide with fear, the kind you can't fake. She'd just told me my son was trying to kill me, and I believed her. The truck door slammed shut behind me, sealing out the hospital lights. Just me, the laptop, and whatever Derek had been hiding. I plugged the USB into my laptop in the dark cab of my Ford F-15. Oh, rain drummed on the roof like a countdown. The parking garage was empty, level 3 corner spot. No cameras pointed this direction. Old habits. The drive showed 847 files, 4 gigabytes of my son's secrets. I opened order _ priority.txt first, like Saskia had said. The instructions were numbered like a bomb disposal manual. Step 1. Open insurance _mc.pdf. Step 2. Open hitlist.txt. Step 3. Upload everything to cloud storage before doing anything else. Step 4. Do not call police until you have verified cloud backup completion. Someone Saskia, I assumed, had thought this through with the kind of precision I recognized. The kind that kept people alive when everything was falling apart. I'd spent 20 years following instructions in the Army Corps of Engineers. I wasn't about to stop now. I opened insurance _mc.pdf. The document loaded slowly, line by line. Standard life insurance policy format. Insured party Martin Cole. Policy amount $40 million. Sole beneficiary Northgate Capital LLC. Issue date September 14th, 2021, 14 months ago. I scrolled to the signature page. There it was, my name in what looked exactly like my handwriting. The capital M with the slight leftward tilt I'd developed after breaking my wrist in 1987. The way the final E trailed off, like I was already thinking about the next word. $40 million, my name. My signature or something, close enough that an insurance company had accepted it. I stared at the screen, trying to pull the memory forward. September 2021. Derek had invited me to dinner at his house in Medina. We'd talked about estate planning, about making sure Silas and Lark were protected if something happened to me. He'd said it was smart to have documents ready that Marlene, his wife, the attorney, had drawn something up. A medical power of attorney, he'd said, in case you have a stroke or something worse. Just sign here, Dad. I'd signed. That wasn't a power of attorney. The cold in my chest spread outward like frost on glass. My son had forged a $40 million life insurance policy, and I'd helped him do it by putting my signature on a blank page. I closed the PDF, opened hitlist.txt. 5 names listed vertically. 1. Preston Lockwood, Chief Accountant, Northgate Capital, completed July 2022. 2. Raymond Vance, External Auditor, pending. 3. Claire Mendoza, Compliance Officer, pending. 4. Saskia Santos, ICURN Harborview, pending. 5. Martin Cole, after signature. I stared at the first name, Preston Lockwood, completed. I pulled up my phone and searched Preston Lockwood, Seattle. The news article loaded. Northgate Capital Accountant dies in tragic balcony fall. July 18, 2022. Preston Lockwood, 45, Chief Accountant for Northgate Capital LLC, was found dead after falling from his 10th floor balcony in downtown Seattle. Police report no signs of foul play. Colleagues describe him as meticulous and detail-oriented, someone who would never have leaned over a railing without checking it first. 4 months ago, completed. My son had killed a man and marked it off his list like a finished task. I sat in the darkness of my truck cab, rain hammering harder now, and felt something I hadn't felt since the war. The absolute certainty that I was in enemy territory, and the enemy knew the terrain better than I did. Except that wasn't quite true, because the 4th name on the list was Saskia Santos, and she'd just handed me everything. The 5th name was mine, Martin Cole, after signature. I hadn't signed yet. Whatever document Derek still needed, whatever final piece locked the insurance payout into place, I hadn't given it to him. That meant I was still useful. That meant I was still breathing. I called the Harborview ICU desk. Saskia answered on the first ring. "Where are my grandkids?" I asked. "Your neighbor, Mr. Harrington, is watching them," she said quietly. "Derek sent them over 2 hours before the hospital called you. Told him you'd asked for help because of a family emergency. 2 hours before. Derek had positioned the pieces before he'd even made the call. Why are you helping me?" Silence on the line. Then, 2 years ago, I made a medical record error. Small, fixable. Derek found it. He's been using it ever since, making me flag certain patient admissions look the other way when his people come through. Last week, I overheard him on a phone call. He said, "Clean the list after the case closes." I knew what that meant. "You have proof." 6 months of recordings, she said. Every call he made threatening me. I've been preparing. She'd told me she was a nurse, but the precision of her record-keeping, the way she'd organized 6 months of evidence with timestamps and cross-references that wasn't nursing, that was forensic accounting. I didn't ask. Some covers exist for a reason. She was 4th on the list. I was 5th. We were both dead the moment Derek finished whatever he was building. "His thank you," I said. "Now upload the files," she said. "And don't trust his systems. He monitors everything." She hung up. I looked at the photo clipped to my sun visor. Silas and Lark at the park last month. Silas holding the screwdriver I'd given him for his 8th birthday, Lark clutching his teddy bear. 8 and 6 years old. The same age as Derek had been when I'd taught him to tie his shoes, to ride a bike, to shake hands and look people in the eye. Where did I go wrong? I pushed the thought away. No time for that now. I pulled out my phone, disabled Wi-Fi, enabled the 4G hotspot, plugged it into the laptop. Derek's systems wouldn't see this upload. It would bypass his network entirely, route through my carrier's towers instead of any connection he could monitor. I dragged all 847 files to my personal cloud storage and hit upload. The progress bar crept forward. 4 minutes, 47 seconds. When it finished, I sat for a moment in the silence. The evidence was safe, distributed, beyond Derek's reach. I started the engine, the smart home in Medina, the one I'd helped him build 5 years ago, back when he'd just married Marlene and was talking about starting a family and building something permanent. I'd spent 3 months on that project. Knew every circuit, every pipe, every security camera, blind spot. I'd taught him how to use a level, how to calculate load-bearing weight, how to hide electrical conduit in walls. Derek had built his trap on a foundation I laid. Time to see if he remembered who taught him. I pulled out of the parking garage. Rain still hammering down, like the sky was trying to wash something clean. The headlights carved through the darkness, east toward Lake Washington, toward Medina, toward the house I'd thought I was building for my son's future. I knew every weakness in that system, and Derek had forgotten I was the one who'd built it. The house appeared at the end of the sloping road, like a ghost. 3 stories of glass and steel I'd helped pour the foundation for, back when I still believed in what I was building. 20 minutes from Harborview Medical Center to Medina. Every turn, every stoplight, my hand stayed steady on the wheel. No speeding, no panic, just the mechanical progression of a man who'd done tactical assessments in worse conditions. Medina, where tech executives and old Seattle money live behind gates and privacy hedges and security systems that cost more than most people's cars. Oak trees lined the streets, their branches heavy with rain. Sparse streetlights cast yellow pools on the wet pavement. No one walked in neighborhoods like this at 1:30 in the morning. No one who didn't belong. I stopped my truck 200 meters short of Derek's driveway, exactly where I could see the whole facade without being obvious. Cut the headlights. Cut the engine. The rain on the windshield turned the house into a watercolor blurred edges. Soft lights deceptively peaceful. 3 stories, the ground floor completely dark. Second floor, east corner, Silas and Lark's bedroom, black as well. They weren't home. Saskia had been right about that. Derek had sent them to the neighbor before staging his hospital performance. 3rd floor center window. That was Derek's office. I could see faint light bleeding through sheer curtains. Someone was awake up there. Marlene, most likely Derek's wife, 30 years old, former federal prosecutor who'd left the Justice Department to become an asset dispute attorney. The kind of legal expert you hired when you wanted to hide money or fight over estates. She'd be sitting at that glass desk Derek had spent $8,000 on, probably reviewing contracts or billing hours while her husband was supposedly bleeding out in an operating room. She had no idea I was sitting in the darkness 200 meters away watching. I sat perfectly still. Old habit from the core, never move unless movement serves a purpose. Let the environment settle around you. Let people forget you're there. The rain kept falling. 5 years ago, Derek had been 27, newly married to Marlene, talking about starting a family and building something permanent. He'd asked me to help with the house, not hire me, just help. Father and son working together on a project that would last. I'd said yes without hesitation. 3 months I'd spent on that build, laid the foundation myself because I didn't trust the contractor's crew to get the drainage right. Installed every electrical panel, designed the whole underground conduit system, argued with Derek about automation versus manual override. He'd wanted everything wireless cloud-based, controlled by voice commands and phone apps. I'd pushed back. Because machines break, I'd told him. People need to know how to shut things off manually. You need redundancy. He'd listened. Back then he still listened. We'd compromised. Smart systems for convenience, manual controls for backup. Outdoor motion sensors on separate battery power. Physical breaker boxes at key locations. A side entrance that didn't connect to the main security grid. Sitting in my truck, staring at the house through rain-blurred glass, I realized something Derek had forgotten. I knew every detail of this place better than he did. He lived here. But I'd built it. I opened the truck door. Rain hit my face, immediately cold. November rain that smelled like wet asphalt and decomposing leaves. I grabbed my small flashlight and multi-tool from the toolbox in the truck bed. 20-year habit. Never walk into an unknown situation without light and something to cut with. The outdoor motion sensors would be my first obstacle. I'd installed 4 of them, 1 at each corner of the property. When triggered, they lit up Marlene's security monitor upstairs, showed her exactly where movement had been detected. Most people would see that as a problem. I saw it as a tool. What had Derek forgotten in 5 years? Everything I'd taught him about redundancy, about fail-safes, about the difference between being smart and being clever. Smart systems automate. Clever systems give you options. I could trigger the front sensor intentionally, a branch tossed onto the lawn, anything heavy enough to register movement. Marlene would see the alert, watch the front yard, on her screen, maybe even go to the window to check. She'd be looking in completely the wrong direction, while I came in through the side gate I'd installed near the garage. The gate that didn't connect to the main security grid, because I'd argued we needed a manual backup entry point in case of power failure. Derek had agreed. He'd been practical back then. I moved through the rain, staying low, keeping to the shadows between streetlights. My boots were silent on the wet grass. 60 years old, and I could still move when I needed to. The side gate was exactly where I remembered, 8 feet tall, dark wood, hidden behind a row of arborvitae that Marlene had probably planted for privacy. I tested the latch. Unlocked. Of course. Who would lock a gate in a neighborhood like this? but I still needed to get inside the house itself. Derek kept a spare key. Everyone does, no matter how sophisticated their digital locks. I'd asked him about it 5 years ago, during the build. "Where will you keep the emergency key?" "Under the flower pot," he'd joked. "Too obvious," I'd said. "Put it somewhere only you would think to look." Now standing in the rain at the corner of his garage, I remembered exactly where that somewhere was. Not under the doormat, not above the door frame, not in any of the places a burglar would check first. The outdoor electrical box, gray metal panel waist height mounted at the garage corner, exactly where I'd installed it. A place only an engineer would think to check, a place Derek had probably forgotten about the moment the house was finished. I opened the panel. Inside, behind the breaker switches and conduit connections, a small magnetic key holder clung to the metal backing. I pulled it free. The key was cold, wet from condensation. Standard house key, nothing fancy, manual backup for the digital lock system, exactly the kind of redundancy I'd insisted on. I held it in my palm, rain still falling around me, the house looming 3 stories above. It felt strangely familiar, like the key to my own home. Because in a way it was. I'd built this place, knew every pipe, every wire, every structural beam. Derek had turned it into a digital fortress, but the bones were still mine, and he'd forgotten who laid the foundation. I used the bones against the skin. The front yard sensor lit up exactly as I'd planned. Motion-detected camera activated Marlene's screen upstairs, now showing an empty lawn while I slipped around the side. I'd walked past the sensor deliberately, made myself visible for exactly 2 seconds, long enough to trigger the system, short enough to disappear before the camera could focus. Marlene would see the alert on her security monitor. She'd check the feed. Rain and wet grass, maybe a branch blown by wind, nothing worth investigating further. And while she watched the front, I moved to the side gate in the shadows of the arborvitae hedge. The key was still cold in my palm, wet from the rain and the condensation inside the electrical box. I inserted it into the side door lock, a standard deadbolt manual backup for the digital system, exactly the kind of redundancy I'd insisted Derek maintain. It turned smoothly. He'd kept the mechanism oiled. I'd taught him that. The door opened without sound. Tempered glass walls on either side of the entrance hall. Voice control panel glowing pale blue in the darkness. Soft light just enough to navigate by. Wide-angle camera mounted in the upper corner, red LED blinking steadily. Recording. The house knew I was here, not through the side door. That circuit was isolated exactly as I'd designed it. But the interior motion sensor above the entrance hall had a 45-degree sweep that covered the first 3 feet past any ground floor entry point. Old redundancy measure, I'd installed it myself. Every magnetic lock in the house engaged simultaneously a cold metallic click that echoed through the halls like a rifle bolt slamming home. The sound came from every direction at once. Front door, back door, garage entrance, every window latch. Lockdown. The window shades began descending. Soft mechanical whir, automated motors pulling blackout fabric down over every pane of glass, cutting off the outside world, sealing me in. The lights stayed off. Only the blue glow of the control panel remained pulsing softly like a heartbeat. I didn't panic. I'd installed these locks myself, argued with Derek about the fail-safe protocols, about what happened if someone needed to get out during a power failure. He'd wanted full automation. I'd insisted on manual override access. The camera's red light stayed steady, watching, recording every movement. Then Derek's voice filled the house. It came from everywhere, surround speakers in every room, perfectly synchronized, the kind of audio system he'd spent $30,000 installing. His voice was calm, professional, the voice of someone who'd planned every word. "Father," he said, "I know you came to the hospital. I know Saskia gave you something. It doesn't matter." I stood in the entrance hall listening to my son's pre-recorded message echo off glass walls. "Don't look for the kids," Derek continued. "They're somewhere you can't reach. You have 2 choices. Option 1, go to the kitchen table. Sign the documents waiting there. When you're finished, the locks will open and you can leave. Option 2, sit where you are and wait for the police to arrive. I've already filed a report, insurance fraud, elder abuse, trespassing. Your prints are all over that policy document. The evidence is already in place." Derek Cole, 32 years old, my son, the boy I'd taught to calculate compound interest and read legal contracts, the man who'd built Northgate Capital into what looked like a legitimate investment firm, And now, listening to his voice recorded days or weeks ago, planned with the cold calculation of someone who thought through every possibility, I understood exactly what he'd become. The message looped once more, then stopped. Silence returned, just the hum of electronics and the rain outside. I hadn't heard Derek's voice in weeks, not since the last Sunday dinner, stilted conversation over Marlene's catered meal, while Silas and Lark played upstairs, the awkward small talk of a father and son who'd run out of things to say to each other. Now here it was, recorded, planned, weaponized. I looked up at the camera's red blinking light, and I smiled, just slightly. Because Derek had made a mistake, the same mistake every clever person makes when they forget the difference between smart and wise. He'd built a digital fortress, automated locks, voice controls, surround sound security cameras, every modern convenience money could buy. A trap designed to catch someone and give them exactly two choices, both of which ended with Derek winning. What had Derek forgotten? That every smart system runs on dumb hardware, and I'd installed all of it. The floor beneath my feet was quarter-sawn oak over reinforced concrete. I'd poured that concrete myself 5 years ago. Spent 2 days getting the grade perfect, making sure the drainage channels ran exactly where they needed to go. I knew what was underneath this expensive flooring conduit, runs junction boxes, manual breaker access points, that no digital system could see or control. Derek had automated the skin of the house, but the bones were still mine. The magnetic locks were strong, industrial-grade, fail-secure design, powered by backup batteries that could last 72 hours. He'd done his homework on those, but the backup batteries had to be somewhere, and I knew exactly where basement utility room northwest corner behind the water heater. I'd helped him install them. Every automated shade had a manual release cord, building code requirement. I'd made sure those were accessible. Every circuit had a physical breaker, and I knew where the main panel was, not the pretty digital control screen on the wall, but the real panel, the one that controlled actual electricity hidden in the maintenance corridor between the garage and the basement. The maintenance corridor Derek had wanted to seal off and forget about. The one I'd insisted we keep accessible. I stood in the darkness, trapped behind magnetic locks and blackout shades, and my son's pre-recorded ultimatum. The camera watched. The system recorded. But beneath this oak floor was concrete I'd mixed and poured. Running through that concrete were circuits I'd designed, and somewhere in this house, hidden behind the smart systems and the automation and the expensive glass walls, was the dumb hardware that made everything work. Derek had forgotten who taught him how to build. I hadn't. I moved through the darkness toward the kitchen, using memory instead of sight. 10 steps from the entrance hall. Turn right at the glass partition. 6 more steps to the doorway. White granite counters that Derek had imported from Italy. Stainless steel appliances that cost more than my first car. And in the center of it all, on the kitchen table, exactly where Derek's recorded voice had said it would be a document. 47 pages. The only light came from the refrigerator's interior, LED, pale and cold. I pulled out my small flashlight, kept the beam narrow and low. 6 signature lines marked in red. I scanned the document the way I'd read 1,000 structural schematics over the years, looking for the load-bearing errors, the places where stress would concentrate and fail. It didn't take long to find them. Co-owner and legally responsible party for Northgate Capital, LLC. Retroactive authority to approve and certify all financial transactions from September 2021 forward. Personal guarantee of corporate debts and liabilities. If I signed this, every financial fraud Derek had committed, the forged insurance policy, the shell companies, whatever other schemes were buried in those 847 files on the USB, would have my name on them, not just as a victim, as an accomplice. I could smell old coffee grounds from the automatic maker on the counter. Marlene had made coffee this morning, in another lifetime, before midnight phone calls and supply closet warnings and hit lists with 5 names. I kept reading. Page after page of legal language designed to look protective while actually transferring liability. Standard clauses mixed with poison. The kind of document Marlene would have written. She was the attorney after all. Former federal prosecutor who knew exactly how to make guilt stick to the right person. Then I reached page 31. The font was smaller than the rest of the document. Easy to miss if you were tired or rushing or trusting that signature pages were the only things that mattered. Section 12.4, Guardianship Provisions. In the event that primary guardian Martin Cole assumes legal and financial responsibility for Northgate Capital LLC, as outlined in sections 3.2 through 8.7, guardianship of minor dependents Silas Cole and Lark Cole shall automatically transfer to the designated legal beneficiary Marlene Prescott with full authority and custody effective upon signature of this agreement. I read it twice. My grandchildren, 8 and 6 years old. Derek wasn't just trying to frame me for fraud and murder. He was going to take Silas and Lark and sign them away like assets on a balance sheet. Guardianship transfer, automatic, legal, binding. I stood in the pale refrigerator, light holding 47 pages that would destroy everything I had left to protect. I put the document down without signing it. Didn't tear it, didn't crumple it. Just set it back on the granite exactly where I'd found it, and looked up at the camera mounted in the corner above the sink. The red light was steady, recording. I spoke quietly into the air. I will not sign. For a moment, nothing happened. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the rain on the roof. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs. Not the soft shuffle of slippers, sharp heels on hardwood. Deliberate, unhurried. Marlene was coming down. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing a gray silk robe, hair down but eyes completely alert. Too alert for someone who'd just been woken by an intruder alarm at 1:47 in the morning. She'd been awake, watching the cameras, waiting to see what I would do. She didn't ask what I was doing in her house, didn't ask how I'd gotten in, just looked at the unsigned documents on the table and then at me. "You're smarter than I thought," she said. Her voice was steady, almost friendly. I said nothing. "That signing that isn't good for you," Marlene continued. She walked to the counter, opened a drawer, pulled out a second folder. "But there's something else you can sign, something that protects you and the kids while removing Derek from the equation." She slid the new document across the granite toward me. Thinner, maybe 15 pages, cleaner formatting. "What's in it?" I asked. "Divorce papers with a custody provision," she said. "I file tomorrow morning. You're named as primary guardian for Silas and Lark. Derek gets supervised visitation. The insurance policy is voided due to fraud. You testify against him and you walk away clean." I looked into her eyes. I'd seen that expression before in the eyes of engineers claiming their design was perfectly safe, while knowing it had critical flaws. In the eyes of contractors swearing they'd used the right grade of steel while cutting corners. The look of someone selling you a solution that solved their problem, not yours. "Why would you help me?" I asked. Marlene smiled. "Because Derek made the mistake of thinking he could control both of us. I'd rather control the outcome myself." She was probably telling half the truth, which meant the other half was poison. I picked up the document, pretended to scan the first page, put it back down. "Thank you," I said quietly. "I need to think about this, and I need to get my blood pressure medication from the car. I'll be out for a moment." Marlene nodded, still smiling, like she'd just won something. "Take your time," she said. "The locks will open when you're ready to leave." I walked toward the back door, the one that led to the garage and the driveway beyond. Marlene stayed in the kitchen watching, not following, just observing. I reached the corner where the hallway turned, and instead of continuing toward the door, I turned left into the secondary corridor. The narrow one, the one I designed for maintenance workers and utility access, the one that didn't appear on the main house blueprint because it was part of the foundation plan, not the architectural design. The one that led down. I heard Marlene's footsteps behind me. She'd followed after all. But by the time she reached the corner, I was already at the top of the basement stairs, my hand on the railing. She stopped, looked at the corridor, at me, still smiling. She thought I'd made a wrong turn, thought I'd confused the layout in the darkness, thought I was heading for a dead end or a utility closet or maybe just panicking. She didn't know this corridor led down, not out. She didn't know the basement existed at all. Derek had finished it himself after I'd left, turned it into storage and server space, and forgotten that someone had to wire it first. I descended the first step. Marlene watched me go, her smile still in place like a predator that didn't realize the prey had just slipped the trap. She thought I was running. I was going exactly where I needed to be. The stairs descended into darkness, concrete walls closing in the smell of dampness and metal, rising to meet me like an old memory I'd buried and just unearthed. 12 steps down. I'd built these stairs myself. Narrow, steep, designed for maintenance access only. Not the kind of stairs you'd show guests or put in architectural photos. The kind of stairs that existed purely for function, getting workers to the electrical and plumbing infrastructure without tracking mud through the main house. My flashlight beam cut through the blackness. The basement was exactly as I'd left it 5 years ago. Unfinished, functional, invisible to everyone living above. Concrete floor slightly uneven where the pour had settled. Exposed piping along the ceiling, water lines drainage, HVAC ducts wrapped in silver insulation. Gray electrical conduits snaking across the walls like veins. The air smelled like dampness and metal and concrete that had never fully cured. No cameras down here, no motion sensors, no Wi-Fi signal strong enough to penetrate this deep. Just concrete metal and circuits that predated every smart system Derek had installed upstairs. I was back in the bones of the house. The main electrical panel was mounted on the north wall, gray metal box, waist height, exactly where I'd bolted it into the concrete foundation. I walked toward it, my boots silent on the dusty floor. I opened the panel door. Every circuit label was in my handwriting. Black permanent marker on white tape, the letters slightly faded but still perfectly readable. Main, kitchen, security, HVAC, garage, manual override. I'd written these labels on a Sunday afternoon in April 2017. Derek had been standing next to me holding the flashlight, asking questions about voltage and amperage, and why we needed so many redundant systems. I'd been patient, explained each one. This is how you keep a house running when the software fails. He'd nodded like he understood. Looking at my own handwriting now, in the darkness of a basement I'd built to protect a house my son had turned into a trap, I realized he'd understood perfectly. He just hadn't cared. I shined the flashlight across the circuit breakers, rows of black switches, each one controlling a different system upstairs. I could flip any one of them and shut down power to specific rooms, specific systems, specific traps Derek had set. But I didn't. Not yet. I stood there for a moment remembering. Derek at 27, standing in this basement when it was just poured concrete and exposed rebar, clean jeans, new work gloves he'd bought specifically for the project. Trying to impress Marlene, trying to prove he could build something with his hands. Why not fully automated, Dad? He'd asked. Why keep manual overrides? I'd been checking the conduit runs, making sure the electrician had followed my specifications. I'd paused, looked at my son, and given him the answer I'd learned from 20 years in the Corps. Because machines break, I'd said. Software crashes, servers go down, Wi-Fi stops working. When that happens, people need to know how to shut things off manually, physical backup. Something that works when everything else fails. He didn't ask again. I thought at the time he'd lost interest, gotten bored with the technical details, wandered back upstairs to check on Marlene or answer emails or do whatever it was he did when he wasn't pretending to care about electrical systems. I was wrong. He'd remembered every word. He just chose to ignore it, chose to build his digital fortress on top of my analog foundation and convince himself that software could solve everything. Derek at 27 asking why, Derek at 32 forgetting the answer. 5 years, and somewhere in there I'd lost my son. I pushed the thought away. No time for grief now. I found what I was looking for on the far right side of the panel, the manual circuit breaker. Simple mechanical lever, not a switch that could be controlled remotely, not a relay that responded to digital commands, just a piece of metal that physically disconnected circuits when you pulled it. It didn't appear in any of Derek's smart home schematics because I'd installed it as an analog failsafe, old school backup for when the clever systems got too clever for their own good. I put my hand on the cold metal lever, didn't pull it yet. What had Derek forgotten? Everything. The manual overrides, the physical failsafes, the fundamental lesson that being clever isn't the same as being smart. I needed to verify one more thing before I started shutting down his systems. I turned away from the electrical panel and swept my flashlight across the basement, looking for the vertical ventilation duct I'd installed along the north wall. There it was, metal pipe 6 inches in diameter, running from the basement floor straight up through the ceiling. I'd argued with the HVAC contractor about it. He'd wanted to run the ducts horizontally through the crawl space, save on material costs. I'd insisted on vertical, straight shot from basement to third floor, better airflow, more efficient cooling. Derek had agreed with me on that one. Anything to save on the electricity bill. I stepped closer to the duct, and I heard something. Sound, faint but clear, echoing down through the metal pipe like someone speaking into a tin can telephone. A voice from 3 floors above. carried perfectly by the vertical shaft I designed to move air efficiently between levels. Marlene's voice. She was on the phone, speaking quietly, probably thought no one could hear her in Derek's third-floor office with the door closed and the blackout shades down. She didn't know about the ventilation duct, didn't know that sound traveled through metal pipes the same way it traveled through air, sometimes better. Didn't know I was standing in the basement, 3 floors below, listening to every word. I pressed my ear to the cold metal. Her voice came through clear as a bell, not the exact words yet, just the tone, confident, calculating, the voice of someone making plans they didn't want anyone else to know about. I held perfectly still. In the darkness of the basement, surrounded by circuits I'd installed and concrete I'd poured, and systems I'd designed to keep a house running, I listened. And my son's wife 3 floors above had no idea her secrets were falling straight down a metal pipe into her father-in-law's ears. Her voice was so clear, I could hear her breathing between words, Marlene 3 floors above me, whispering to someone who thought no one else was listening. I pressed my ear harder against the cold metal duct. Every word carried down through the pipe, like it was designed for this purpose, which, in a strange way it was. I'd built this ventilation system to move air efficiently between floors. Sound traveled the same pathways, sometimes better. He thinks I don't know about the Cayman account, Marlene said. Her voice was quiet but perfectly clear, not speaking to Derek, speaking to someone else, someone who was helping her. I've had the routing numbers for 6 months. When he's arrested, I'm the only one with access. 6 months. She'd been planning this since May, since before Preston Lockwood fell from his balcony, since before Derek started tightening the noose. Marlene wasn't Derek's accomplice. She was his competitor. The transfer can happen within hours, she continued. I stood perfectly still in the basement darkness, listening to my son's wife explain how she planned to steal everything he'd killed for. There was a pause. The person on the other end of the call must have asked a question. Then Marlene's voice shifted, still quiet but harder, more confident. The old man is in the house. My blood went cold. She knew. She'd known the whole time. I was standing in her kitchen, reading her documents, walking through her corridors. She'd watched me disappear into the maintenance hallway, and she knew exactly what I was doing. Doesn't matter, Marlene said. He won't get anywhere. The locks are engaged, the cameras are recording, and Derek's system has him trapped. When Derek gets back from wherever he went, he'll find his father right where we need him. Another pause. Wait for my signal, Marlene said. Let them destroy each other first, then we move. The call ended, soft click, silence. I stepped back from the ventilation duct. My hand was shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the cold metal and the sudden clarity of understanding. Marlene wasn't just betraying Derek. She was using me as bait. Let them destroy each other first. Derek thought he was eliminating his father to collect insurance money and consolidate power. Marlene thought she was letting Derek implicate himself while she positioned to steal the Cayman accounts and disappear. 2 predators circling each other in the dark, each convinced they were the only one hunting. I stood in the basement I'd built, processing what I'd just heard. Derek wanted me dead and Marlene in prison. Marlene wanted Derek in prison and the stolen money in her accounts. Both of them wanted Silas and Lark under their control leverage assets, proof of legitimacy, depending on which way the legal battles fell. 2 scorpions in a bottle, each certain it would sting first, neither realizing the bottle had no way out. And I was the one who'd poured the concrete foundation of that bottle. I turned back to the electrical panel, shined my flashlight across the circuit breakers and conduit runs, and manual overrides that Derek had forgotten existed. A different kind of clarity settled over me, the kind I'd felt in the cores, when a chaotic situation suddenly resolved into simple tactical geometry. I didn't need to fight them both. They were already fighting each other. Derek thought he'd eliminate Marlene after the insurance payout cleared. Marlene thought she'd steal everything before Derek could execute his endgame. Both thought they were the only predator in the room. Both were wrong. My role wasn't to attack, it was to contain. Keep them both inside the house. Keep the evidence secure. Keep the systems locked down. Wait for them to destroy each other while I made sure the cage door stayed shut. The USB drive had 847 files. I'd only read the priority documents, the insurance policy. The hit list, the initial evidence Saskia had marked urgent. There were hundreds more I hadn't seen yet. Financial records, email threads. Whatever proof Derek and Marlene had accumulated against each other over months or years of planning. I needed to read those files, upload everything to cloud storage before either of them could delete it. secure the evidence so thoroughly that neither Derek's technical expertise nor Marlene's legal maneuvering could make it disappear. But now I understood something they didn't. I wasn't just securing evidence of Derek's crimes, I was securing evidence of Marlene's betrayal, the Cayman routing numbers she'd admitted to having, the 6 months of planning she'd just confessed to, the conspiracy to let Derek implicate himself while she positioned to steal everything. 2 separate criminal conspiracies, recorded on the USB, and now confirmed by her own voice echoing down through a ventilation duct she didn't know could carry sound. I looked up at the basement ceiling, unfinished concrete exposed pipes, the metal duct running vertically through 3 floors of expensive automation. Somewhere above me, Marlene was probably putting her phone away, maybe pouring herself a drink, maybe reviewing her own documents and timelines and escape routes. She thought I was trapped in her house. She thought Derek would return and find me exactly where they needed me, caught on camera fingerprints on documents guilty by presence. She thought she'd wait for us to destroy each other and then walk away with everything. She was wrong. I still had work to do, files to read, evidence to upload, grandchildren to protect. But the tactical picture had changed. I wasn't fighting 2 enemies anymore. I was watching 2 enemies fight each other while I built the cage around both of them. Derek had built his digital fortress on my analog foundation. Marlene had built her legal trap using Derek's own paranoia against him. But I'd built the house itself, knew every wire, every pipe, every structural weakness, knew how to lock the doors from the inside, knew how to shut down the systems that made them feel safe. They were both so busy destroying each other, they'd forgotten I was the one who built the cage they were fighting in. I turned off my flashlight, stood in complete darkness for a moment, listening, thinking. Above me, Marlene was planning her escape. Somewhere in the city, Derek was returning from his fake hospital performance. And in the basement, neither of them remembered, existed their father, their mark, their victim, their bait, was finally smiling. Not because I'd won, because I finally understood the game. Understanding the game meant understanding what was already in motion. I pulled my phone from my pocket. The screen glowed blue in the basement darkness, 4 bars of 4G signal, no connection to Derek's Wi-Fi, no digital trail he could trace. I enabled the mobile hotspot, connected my laptop. Derek's surveillance system upstairs had no way to monitor this. His cameras couldn't see through concrete. His network couldn't intercept a signal that never touched his routers. I selected all 847 files from the USB drive, dragged them to my personal cloud storage, hit upload. Progress bar appeared 4 minutes, 47 seconds estimated, the same timing as before in the hospital parking garage. But this time, I was 3 floors beneath Derek's office in a basement he'd forgotten existed using infrastructure he couldn't control. While the upload ran, I opened the file I'd only glanced at earlier, hitlist.txt. 5 names listed vertically, clean formatting, no emotion, just a checklist. First name, Preston Lockwood. Chief Accountant, Northgate Capital. Next to it, in red, text completed, July 2022. I pulled up my phone browser, searched the name in Seattle. The article loaded. Northgate Capital accountant dies in tragic balcony fall, July 18th, 2022. Preston Lockwood, 45, fell from his 10th floor apartment balcony in downtown Seattle. Police investigation found no evidence of foul play. Colleagues described him as careful and detail-oriented, not someone who would lean carelessly over a railing. Completed. My son had murdered a man and marked it off his list like a finished task on a project timeline. I kept reading. Second name, Raymond Vance, external auditor. Status, pending. Third name, Claire Mendoza, compliance officer. Status pending. Fourth name, Saskia Santos, the CURN, Harborview Medical Center. Status pending. The woman who'd handed me this USB in a supply closet and told me to run. She'd known she was 4th on a list that had already claimed 1 life. 5th name, Martin Cole. My own name stared back at me from the screen. Next to it, handwritten in Derek's precise engineering notation, after signature. I read it twice. After signature. I hadn't signed yet. The trap document still sat unsigned on the kitchen table upstairs. That meant I was still useful to Derek, still alive because he needed something from me before he could check my name off the list and move on to the next phase. That's what this whole night was: pressure tactics. Hospital call to create urgency. Locked house to create helplessness. Pre-recorded message to create inevitability. all designed to get me to sign the documents that would seal my own execution. My name, fifth on the list, Martin Cole. After signature, like I was an item waiting to be crossed off a grocery list. The upload progress bar hit 100%. File transfer complete. A notification appeared. All files successfully uploaded to cloud storage. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The evidence was secure now, distributed beyond Derek's reach. Even if he destroyed the USB, even if he deleted every file on his own servers, the proof existed in 3 different data centers across 2 continents. But I wasn't done reading yet. I noticed something at the bottom of the USB file directory, a folder I'd missed before, hidden by the default view settings, archive_MC_2020, Martin Cole 2020. I opened it. The first file was a document titled accident_plan_primary.pdf, date created March 15th, 2020. I clicked it open. Detailed scenario. Highway SR 99 between Seattle and Everett. Time 6:47 p.m. Weather conditions rain, reduced visibility. Planned mechanical failure, brake line compromise, untraceable after collision. Expected outcome, fatal accident ruled, driver error or mechanical failure due to age of vehicle. Beneath the scenario, a handwritten note scanned into the PDF, postponed signature incomplete. MC must sign power of attorney documents first. Reschedule after estate planning dinner, April 2020. March 2020, I'd turned 58 that month. Derek had called to wish me happy birthday. We'd talked for maybe 5 minutes awkward small talk about weather and work, and whether I'd seen the new documentary he recommended. And he'd already scheduled my death. 2 years ago. Not a recent decision. Not a plan that developed over months of desperation or greed. 2 years, 8 months of premeditation. I scrolled through the folder. More documents. Accident_plan_secondary.pdf dated June 2020. Accident_plan_revised.pdf dated November 2020. Each one postponed for the same reason. Incomplete documentation signature, required legal framework not yet in place. Every dinner invitation, every concerned question about my health, every offer to help me organize my estate planning, all of it preparation steps for murder. Not a son checking on his aging father, a killer positioning his target. I sat in the darkness of the basement laptop screen, the only light processing a timeline that rewrote every memory of the last 2 years. Derek at 29 in March 2020, planning my death for the first time. Derek at 30, hosting Thanksgiving dinner and asking if I'd updated my will. Derek at 31, bringing Silas and Lark to visit and watching me teach them how to use a screwdriver while he calculated when I'd sign the documents he needed. Derek at 32, finally ready to execute a plan he'd been refining for 32 months. I thought of last Friday, 5 days ago. Silas and Lark waving goodbye from the driveway of this house. Silas had shown me a school project about bridges. Lark had given me a drawing of our family stick figures holding hands, 8 and 6 years old. I stood up. The grief was still there. I'd lost my son somewhere between 27 and 32, between the man who'd helped me build this house and the man who'd turned it into a trap. But the grief would have to wait. Right now I had 2 grandchildren who needed their grandfather alive. I had evidence secured in the cloud that Derek couldn't delete. I had a basement full of manual overrides he'd forgotten existed. I had a house I'd built myself, which meant I knew every weakness in every system. 20 years in the Army Corps taught me one thing. Once you understand the terrain, you don't need a map. I understood now. 2 years and 8 months Derek had been planning this. 2 years of smiles and Sunday dinners while he marked days off a calendar ending in my death. But he'd made one critical error. But acting on terrain you built means knowing what's already on it. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through contacts in the basement darkness until I found the number I'd saved 8 months ago. The neighbor from 2 doors down who'd introduced himself one evening in March said he'd just moved to the street. Professional handshake. Offered to help if we ever needed anything. Something about him had made me save the number instead of forgetting it, the way you forget most introductions. I'd never called it, until now. Saskia had said the kids were with a neighbor. This had to be him. I dialed. 1 ring. Then a man's voice steady and alert. Mr. Cole. Not a question, not surprised. He'd been expecting my call. At 2:10 in the morning, "It's Silas and Lark," I said. "Saskia told me they're with you." "They're sleeping here, Mr. Cole," the man said. His voice was calm, professional, in a way that didn't match a neighbor woken at this hour. "They are safe." He used their names without me providing them, knew exactly who I was talking about. "I don't remember giving you my number," I said. "How did you know to expect my call?" 2 seconds of silence on the line. Then, "We've been tracking Northgate Capital for 8 months, Mr. Cole. We knew you were coming to this house tonight." Tracking? 8 months. I stood perfectly still in the basement darkness. Phone pressed to my ear, processing what I'd just heard. "FBI," I said, not a question. "Yes," the man confirmed. "My name is Grant Ross, Special Agent. We've had Derek Cole under investigation since March of this year." March, 8 months ago. While I'd been teaching Silas how to change a bicycle tire and having awkward Sunday dinners with a son who was already planning my murder, federal agents had been building a case. "Saskia Santos came to us 6 months ago," Ross continued. "She'd been recording Derek's calls documenting the extortion. When we verified her information against our existing investigation, we knew we had enough to move forward. But we needed the right moment. 8 months. The FBI had been investigating my son for 8 months, and I'd sat at his dinner table 3 weeks ago, completely unaware. "Why didn't you contact me?" I asked. "Because you were the target," Ross said simply. "Informing you would have changed your behavior. Derek would have noticed. We needed him to continue operating normally until we had everything we needed for the warrant." "The warrant," meaning they were planning to arrest him, soon. When I asked, "That depends on several factors," Ross said. "Which brings me to something important, Mr. Cole. I need you to understand this. Clearly don't do anything that might affect the arrest warrant. Fourth Amendment requires us to follow specific procedures. If you interfere with evidence, if you compromise the chain of custody, if you do anything that could be construed as entrapment or coercion, you could invalidate everything we've built." I understood immediately. Federal cases lived and died on procedure. One wrong move by a civilian could collapse months of investigation. "What can I do?" I asked. "Nothing," Ross said. "Stay where you are. Stay safe. Let us handle this." I looked at the electrical panel on the wall in front of me, the manual circuit breaker lever, the systems I'd built that Derek had forgotten. How many operations had I run in the Army Corps where success depended on parallel teams working blind to each other, too many to count? Sometimes the best coordination was no coordination, just separate units pursuing separate objectives that happened to converge at the right moment. "I won't interfere with your warrant," I said carefully, "but I need to make sure no one in this house escapes before it's executed." Silence on the line, longer this time. Then Ross's voice with something that might have been respect understood. "Stay safe, Mr. Cole." The call ended. I stood in the basement with my phone screen fading to black, processing what I'd just learned. The FBI had been watching. Silas and Lark were safe with a federal agent, not just a neighbor. Saskia hadn't been acting alone. She'd been working with investigators who'd verified every piece of evidence. I wasn't fighting alone. I'd never been alone. But that didn't change what I needed to do. Ross had said, "Don't affect the warrant. Don't compromise evidence. Don't interfere with procedure." He hadn't said, "Don't turn off the lights." I pocketed my phone and turned to the electrical panel. The manual circuit breaker lever was exactly where I'd installed it 5 years ago. Simple mechanical switch. No Wi-Fi connection. No digital integration. No way for Derek's smart systems to override it or prevent it from functioning. Pulling this lever wouldn't destroy evidence, wouldn't compromise the chain of custody, wouldn't affect whatever warrant the FBI was preparing. It would just turn off the electricity, cut power to the cameras, the sensors, the automated locks, the digital systems Derek relied on, send the whole house into darkness, make it harder for anyone to leave, make it easier to control who went where. The FBI had their operation, their timeline, their procedures. I had mine. Parallel action, separate objectives, convergence at the right moment. I put my hand on the cold metal lever. Above me, 3 floors of house hummed with electricity. Cameras recording every angle, motion sensors tracking movement, digital locks securing every exit. Screens displaying security feeds to Marlene's office where she sat, planning her escape with Derek's stolen money. Derek had built his fortress on systems he thought were impenetrable. Marlene had built her trap on legal maneuvering she thought was flawless. The FBI had built their case on 8 months of careful investigation. And I stood in a basement I'd poured concrete from my hand on a lever they had all forgotten existed. One pull, everything goes dark. But timing mattered. Pull it too soon and I'd tip my hand. Too late and someone might escape. I needed to wait for the right moment. The moment when Derek and Marlene were both in position. Both committed. Both trapped by their own plans. I took a breath. My hand stayed on the lever. And I waited. I didn't pull the lever right away. Gave myself 5 minutes in the darkness to remember the last time my son and I built something together that wasn't broken from the start. I sat on an old toolbox in the corner, hand still on the circuit breaker but not pulling, flashlight off. Total silence except for distant HVAC hum through the pipes overhead. 5 minutes of witnessing, not hesitation. Letting myself remember one more time. Not the house I was destroying, just wood and wire and concrete. What I was destroying was the last memory of when Derek looked at me like a son instead of a mark. I sat in the dark and let it come. 5 years ago, spring 2017, Derek had called on a Tuesday afternoon. Dad, I'm building a house in Medina. Marlene and I, we're really doing this. Could you help? First time in 5 years, he'd asked me for anything real. I'd said yes before he finished the question. 3 months, April through June 2017. I poured the foundation because I didn't trust the contractor's crew, ran every electrical line, installed the HVAC ducting, built the maintenance corridor that led to this basement. Wasn't paid. Derek offered, but I turned him down. My son had asked. That was enough. We worked side by side most days. Derek would leave Northgate Capital around 4 p.m. change into new work boots show up with coffee and questions. I'd thought maybe we were building more than a house, maybe building a way back to each other. I was wrong, but I didn't know that yet. One memory surfaced, crystal clear. June afternoon, hot. We were in this basement installing water pipes. Derek was tightening a fitting, trying to get it secure before we tested pressure. His hands were wrong, gripping the wrench too tight, angle off, forcing the fitting instead of letting physics work. I didn't say anything, just took the wrench from his hands. Adjusted his fingers, one by one. Index here, thumb there, wrist angle like this. Let the lever do the work, I said quietly. Not your strength. The tool multiplies force. Trust it. Derek nodded, tried again, got it right. Then he looked up at me. For half a second, just half, it was my son looking at his father, not the CEO, not the stranger I'd been losing since college, just my boy, 27 years old, learning how to hold a wrench. That look lasted maybe 2 seconds. Then it was gone. Professional distance returned. The moment passed. But I'd carried it for 5 years. That half second when I thought, maybe we're okay. Sitting in the basement now, November 2022, I understood what I'd been too hopeful to see. That was goodbye. Derek showing me one last time the son he used to be before committing to whatever he was becoming. 2 years and 8 months later, he'd create the first murder plan. March 2020. My death scheduled and postponed only because I hadn't signed the right paperwork. I opened my eyes in the darkness. 5 minutes had passed. I'd taught Derek how to hold a wrench, read circuit diagrams, pour concrete and check if it had cured properly, calculate load-bearing weight, install plumbing that wouldn't leak. Technical skills, practical knowledge, things you could write in a manual and follow step by step. But the foundation inside a person, the one that keeps them from becoming what Derek became, I had no blueprint for that. You can teach someone how to build a house, but teaching them how to be good, I never found the schematic for that. Sitting in the basement I'd built, I understood something that hurt worse than betrayal. I had succeeded at everything that didn't matter, failed at the only thing that did. My son knew how to wire circuits, install security systems, build elaborate traps and plan murders with the same precision I'd taught him for engineering calculations. But he didn't know how to be decent, how to value human life, how to look at his own father and see something worth preserving instead of something worth $40 million. That wasn't something Derek had lost. That was something I'd never taught him. I stood up, knees cracked, 60 years old in a basement I'd built at 55, still believing my son might need a father instead of just an engineering consultant. I put my hand back on the circuit breaker lever. The manual override Derek had forgotten, the physical failsafe he'd dismissed because he trusted software over hardware, the one piece of this house that couldn't be controlled by apps or voice commands, just cold metal and simple mechanics. I took one breath, thought of Silas and Lark sleeping safe with a federal agent 2 doors down. Thought of Saskia, 4th on the hit list, who'd risked everything to hand me a USB drive. Thought of Derek's voice through surround speakers offering two choices that both ended with him winning. Thought of that June afternoon when my son looked at me like a son for the last time. My hand rested on the lever. Not yet. The sequence had to come first. The only sound was my breathing in the basement I'd poured with my own hands. NFPA 70 shutdown protocol kills sub-circuits in sequence before the main breaker to prevent electrical fires during rapid de-energization. I'd added it during construction as a last-minute safety measure. Derek had signed off without reading the details. First, camera circuits. Every lens in this house going blind at once. Click. Second, audio system. Surround speakers, intercoms, monitoring devices. Click. Third, magnetic locks. Fire safety required, they fail to open position. Click. Fourth, automated lighting backup systems. Click. Fifth, network infrastructure. Routers, servers, Wi-Fi access points. Click. Then I pulled the main breaker. Hard, clean, decisive. The lever clicked down. Everything that remained, every circuit I'd installed 5 years ago, died in the same instant. 3 floors of smart home technology reduced to nothing but expensive metal and dark glass. Professional engineering competence repurposed for war. The final breaker clicked into place. 2 seconds of absolute silence. Just my breathing in the basement darkness. Then from 3 floors above, echoing down through the vertical ventilation duct, Marlene's scream. Sharp, sudden. The sound of someone realizing they've just lost every advantage they thought they had. She'd been sitting in Derek's office probably reviewing her Cayman account numbers, on her laptop planning her escape. Then every light went out. Screen went dark. Wi-Fi died. Cell signal vanished. No cameras to show her what happened. No intercom to call for help. No phone signal to reach whoever she'd been conspiring with. Just darkness and silence and the sudden understanding that she was trapped. I stood perfectly still, listening to her panic echo down through the metal pipe. Then I turned off my flashlight. Didn't need it anymore. I'd walked these stairs 500 times during construction. Hand on the railing, ascending from basement to first floor. Knew every step by feel. 7th step creaked, I skipped it. Stepping from 6th to 8th in one smooth motion. Curve at the landing where the stairs turned 90 degrees. 12 steps total from basement to main floor. In the dark, I could move faster than Marlene could in full light. This was my terrain. I'd built it. Knew every dimension, every angle, every structural detail. Above me, I heard Marlene's footsteps. Unsteady, fumbling. She was trying to find the stairs from 3rd floor to 2nd, stumbling through Derek's office in the total darkness. I heard her voice sharp, frustrated. No signal, no damn it. Speaking into her phone, but the Wi-Fi was dead. The cell booster ran on main power, and main power was something I'd just eliminated. She knew this house in daylight, knew where the furniture was, where the doors led, which hallway connected to which room. But in darkness, it was a maze she'd never learned. How many times had I climbed these stairs during construction? Enough that my feet knew every rise, every tread, every board that had settled slightly wrong during the cure. I reached the 1st floor hallway, stood motionless, listening. Marlene was still fumbling on the 3rd floor. I could hear her heavy footsteps, the sound of someone moving too fast in unfamiliar darkness, hitting furniture, cursing under her breath. The magnetic locks had failed open like I designed them to. Fire safety code. Can't trap people in a burning building. But Marlene didn't know the house well enough to navigate blind to an exit. She'd lived here for 5 years and never bothered to learn the emergency routes. Never walked the halls in darkness. Never counted steps or memorized distances. Why would she? The house had voice controls and automated lighting and sensors that activated before you even entered a room. Until all of that died at once. I stood in the entrance hallway, perfectly still, in the darkness I'd created. Above me, Marlene's panic was escalating. I could track her movement by sound, fumbling along the 3rd floor hallway toward what she thought were the stairs, but was actually a closet. She'd figure it out eventually, but by then it would be too late. Then I heard a different sound, from the front entrance, 15 feet to my left, metal on metal, the distinct jingle of keys. The deadbolt turning mechanical lock, the kind that didn't need electricity. Only door in the house I couldn't control from the electrical panel. I'd tried to convince Derek to install a smart lock on the front entrance. He'd refused. What if the power goes out? What if the battery dies? I need a physical key that always works. I'd agreed with him at the time. Now I understood why that was a mistake. The door swung open. Faint light from outside street lamps 200 meters away, just enough to create a silhouette. Bandaged head, still wrapped from the hospital performance that was never real. Clean white gauze that didn't show any blood or actual trauma. Derek stepped into the entrance hall of his own house. Into darkness he hadn't planned for. Into silence his systems couldn't explain. He paused just inside the threshold. I could see his shape against the dim exterior light, see him reach for the wall switch by instinct. Flip it uselessly, realize nothing was responding. "Power's out," he muttered, speaking to himself or maybe to Marlene, expecting her to hear through intercoms that no longer worked. I stood 15 feet away, invisible in the black, watching my son walk into a trap built from the foundation he'd forgotten I laid. Derek pulled out his phone. Screen glowed in the darkness, battery-powered, independent of the house systems. Used the phone light to scan the entrance hall. And in that moment, when the light swept across where I stood, I knew he'd see me. But I didn't move, didn't flinch. Just stood there in the darkness I'd created, waiting for my son to realize he wasn't alone. I raised the flashlight. Let the beam cut straight across the entrance hall, 15 feet of darkness between us, collapsing into a single line of light that ended at my son's face. Not a silhouette anymore, not a shape in a doorway. Derek, 32 years old, my son. Standing in the house we'd built together, looking at the father he'd been planning to kill for 2 years and 8 months. The flashlight beam found his features, high cheekbones he'd inherited from his mother, the slight asymmetry in his jaw from when he'd fallen off his bike at age 7 and I'd driven him to the emergency room. Eyes that used to look at me with questions about how engines worked and why concrete took so long to cure. Those eyes looked different now, harder, calculating. The eyes of someone who'd marked his own father's name on a hit list and written "after signature" next to it like a condition on a contract. Then I saw the bandages, wrapped around his head in pristine white gauze, professional looking. The kind of dressing a hospital would apply after treating head trauma. Except they were too clean. No blood seeping through the fabric, no discoloration from iodine or antiseptic, no swelling around the edges where real trauma would cause inflammation. Just perfectly white gauze wrapped by someone who knew exactly how injured needed to look on camera, but hadn't bothered to make it look real up close. I'd seen enough construction site injuries to know what head trauma looked like. This wasn't it. Derek had never been in surgery, never been in a coma, never been in danger. He'd walked into Harborview Medical Center, played his part in whatever script he'd prepared, and walked out with theatrical props that would photograph well for insurance purposes. The hospital call at midnight, the serious car accident, the emergency surgery, all of it performance designed to create an alibi and lure me into position. And I'd come, because despite everything I'd learned in the last 3 hours, despite the USB drive and the hit list and the 2 years of planning, some part of me had still hoped the call was real. That hope died looking at those bandages. Derek looked at me across the dark hallway. Not surprised I was here, just surprised the house was dark. His mouth curved slightly, almost a smile. "You think turning off the lights is enough?" His voice was steady, calm. The voice of someone who'd rehearsed this moment, planned for multiple scenarios, built contingencies into contingencies. Still thought he was in control, still thought I was the one who'd walked into a trap. I'd looked into those eyes the day he was born. Looked into them when he took his first steps, when he learned to ride that bike, when he graduated from college with honors in business and engineering, when he married Marlene in a ceremony that cost more than my first house, when he brought Silas and Lark to meet me for the first time. And now, looking into them across 15 feet of darkness in a house we'd built together, I couldn't find my son anywhere inside them, just the stranger he'd become. I kept the flashlight beam absolutely steady on his face, looked at the bandages that were too clean, the eyes that were too cold, the slight smile that suggested he thought he'd already won. "No," I said quietly, slowly, wanted him to hear every word. "Turning off the lights is just so you couldn't call anyone." The smile faded slightly. He understood immediately. No power meant no cameras recording this conversation, no Wi-Fi to send messages, no cell booster to strengthen his phone signal through the concrete and steel construction I'd built to last. Just the two of us in the dark, father and son, having the first honest conversation we'd had in years, maybe ever. This was the first real thing we'd said to each other without performance or politeness or the careful distance we'd maintained through Sunday dinners and holiday phone calls. Just truth, cold and sharp and unavoidable. "You think you understand what's happening here," Derek said. His voice had changed, still calm, but with an edge now. The edge of someone whose plan had encountered an unexpected variable. "I know exactly what's happening here," I said. I did. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I understood my son completely. He wasn't conflicted, wasn't struggling with guilt or doubt or some internal battle between right and wrong. He'd simply calculated that I was worth more dead than alive, written it down in a spreadsheet somewhere, and proceeded with the same methodical precision I'd taught him to use for engineering problems. The moral foundation I'd failed to build inside him, that wasn't something he'd lost. It was something that had never existed. Silence stretched between us. 3 seconds, 4. Derek's face in the flashlight beam processing what I'd said. Processing the implications of standing in his own house with no power, no cameras, no systems responding to his commands. No way to call Marlene upstairs, where she was still fumbling in the darkness. No way to activate the backup protocols he'd probably built into his security systems. Just an old man with a flashlight who'd built every circuit Derek's digital fortress ran on. Derek's hand moved, slowly, deliberately, toward his inside coat pocket, reaching for something he thought would give him power, something he thought would shift the advantage back to him. I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't flinch, just kept the flashlight beam steady on his face and waited to see what my son thought would save him now. His fingers slipped into the pocket, found what he was looking for. The movement was practiced, smooth, the motion of someone who'd rehearsed this exact scenario. I'd taught him that. How to move with purpose, how to commit to an action once you decided on it, how to follow through without hesitation. Watching him reach into his coat pocket with that same deliberate confidence, I understood every practical skill I'd ever taught him he'd mastered perfectly, and used them all to become exactly what I'd failed to prevent. His hand emerged from the pocket. I stood 15 feet away in the darkness I'd created flashlight beam unwavering and waited. The object Derek pulled from his coat pocket wasn't a weapon. It was his phone. The screen illuminated his face in the darkness, white light casting shadows that made him look older, harder. He held it between us like a shield. "You think copying my files gives you leverage?" His voice was calm, almost amused. I didn't respond, just waited. "That USB contains 847 files," Derek continued. "Every transaction, every forged signature, every shell company transfer. 2 years of planning, all documented exactly the way you'd need for a federal case." He was confirming what I already knew, giving me the inventory like he was reading from a checklist. "The problem," Derek said, tapping his phone screen, "is that you can't actually use any of it." I kept my flashlight beam steady on his face, waiting for the trap I knew was coming. "Military-grade encryption," he said. "Every file you copy locks itself the moment you try to open it without the decryption key, and the key only releases under one condition." He stepped closer, 2 steps, 12 feet between us now. "When you electronically sign a contract transferring your 40% the Northgate Capital stake to me. That's the trigger. Sign the transfer, the files unlock. Try to open them any other way." He smiled. "They corrupt, permanently, unrecoverable." My expression didn't change. "You walked into my house," Derek continued, "thinking you'd outsmart me with a USB stick. But I designed the system to protect itself from exactly this kind of theft. Every file has a digital tripwire. You can't read them, can't share them, can't do anything with them except watch them self-destruct if you try." He thought he'd won, thought he'd engineered the perfect trap. This was what it had come to. My son and I standing in darkness, each trying to outmaneuver the other with technical tricks and digital traps. When did we stop being father and son and become adversaries in an information war? The answer was simple: September 2021. When he forged my signature on a life insurance policy worth enough to make murder profitable. But I pushed the grief away, focused on what mattered now. Derek had engineered an elaborate trap for someone trying to steal data via USB. Encryption triggers, self-destruct protocols, digital tripwires that would corrupt evidence if accessed incorrectly. But he'd made one crucial assumption. He assumed I would only use his infrastructure, his network, his systems. He never considered I'd bring my own transmission route. The cloud backup I'd uploaded at 2:04 a.m. 28 minutes before Derek even knew I had. The files had gone through a completely different path. Private 4G hotspot. My carrier's cell towers. No connection to his Wi-Fi, his routers, his monitoring systems. Raw files uploaded unopened. No decryption needed, because I never triggered his tripwires in the first place. My hand moved to my own phone in my pocket. I pulled out my phone. Let the screen illuminate between us 2 points of light in the dark hallway, father and son, each holding the technology we thought would save us. My screen showed a notification. I'd kept it there deliberately, waited for this exact moment. Backup complete, 847 files uploaded to secure cloud storage. Timestamp: November 2022, 2:04 a.m. Connection: private. 4. G network. I turned the screen toward Derek. You designed your system to run on software, I said quietly. I copied everything before you knew I had it. Through a route your system doesn't monitor. Derek's smile vanished. His hand holding his phone dropped slightly, just an inch. But I saw it. Your encryption only works if I tried to open the USB files. I continued. I didn't need to. I uploaded them raw, unopened, straight to cloud storage via a private 4G connection while you were still asleep. Your Wi-Fi monitoring your smart home logs, your network intrusion detection, none of it saw the transmission because it never touched your network. 40 years as a mechanical engineer taught me one principle. Every system has an assumption gap. Derek assumed I'd use his infrastructure. He never considered I'd bring my own. The private 4G hotspot had cost $89. It bypassed $50,000 worth of his security architecture. Simple solution beating elaborate system. Derek said nothing. For the first time since he'd walked through that front door, he was completely silent, just staring at my phone screen, at the timestamp that proved I'd won this round 28 minutes before he even knew we were playing. The silence stretched between us, father and son, engineer and CEO. Each one staring at the other in the darkness of a house we'd built together 5 years ago, when I still thought we were building something that would last. Then Marlene's voice cut through from somewhere above us. Sharp, urgent, echoing down through the stairwell. Hey Derek, she's here. Footsteps on the second floor, moving fast. Derek's head turned toward the staircase. His expression shifted, shock draining away, replaced by something else. Alarm recognition. I didn't move, didn't understand. Who was she? Derek didn't respond to Marlene, didn't call back. Just looked from the stairs back to me, and I saw a different kind of calculation forming behind his eyes. Not the arrogance of someone who thought they had won. The desperation of someone who just realized they were losing on multiple fronts at once. The back door opened. Sound came from the kitchen, 15 feet behind, where Derek and I stood in the entrance hall. The distinctive creak of the door I'd installed with a deliberate friction point, so you'd always hear it open. A woman stepped through, rain dripping from her dark coat, late 30s maybe, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, carrying a waterproof messenger bag. Saskia Santos. I recognized her immediately from the hospital. The ICU nurse who had pulled me into a supply closet and handed me the USB drive that had started all of this. But she wasn't wearing scrubs now, and the way she moved, confident, purposeful, told me she was more than what she'd appeared to be. Derek's head had turned at the sound. He was staring toward the kitchen, toward the woman who just entered his house without permission, who just came in. His voice was sharp, controlled but with an edge. Marlene's voice drifted down from the second floor. It's the accountant. Derek's jaw tightened. Saskia. He knew her. Of course he did. She was fourth on the hit list. Saskia looked at me across the dark kitchen, nodded once, then spoke quietly like we were continuing a conversation we'd started hours ago. I left the hospital when I heard he was discharged, she said. He's here, I said, keeping my flashlight beam pointed at Derek in the hallway. And upstairs. I brought what you need. She pulled a phone from her messenger bag. Not her personal phone, a separate device in a protective case. The kind you'd use to preserve evidence. Started recording in May 2022. Saskia said, walking toward me, but keeping her eyes on Derek. Every call he made threatening me, every demand, every time he told me to flag a patient admission or look the other way. She was a forensic accountant. That's what Marlene had called her. Not a nurse, someone who investigated financial crimes. Someone who'd looked into Preston Lockwood's death in July and found patterns that didn't add up. And she'd been recording Derek for 6 months. You knew since May, I asked. She glanced at me. I needed 6 months of pattern evidence. One call could be explained away. 6 months of systematic extortion. That's a federal case. Derek stood in the entrance hallway, 15 feet from us, phone still in his hand, but forgotten now, staring at Saskia like she was a variable he'd failed to account for in his calculations. For 6 months, I'd been fighting alone, sitting through awkward Sunday dinners while my son planned my murder, teaching my grandchildren how to use tools while their father forged documents with my signature. And the whole time someone else had known. Someone else had been building a case. I pulled out my own phone, showed Saskia the notification still glowing on the screen. Backup complete 847 files, timestamp 2:04 a.m., private 4G network. She looked at it, smiled slightly, the first genuine smile I'd seen since midnight. "You got the financial records?" she said. "You got his voice," I replied. She turned her phone toward me, showed me the recording app interface, dates and timestamps stretching from May through October 2022. Dozens of files, each one labeled with Derek's name and a brief description. "He can't encrypt audio he doesn't know exists," Saskia said quietly. 2 independent evidence streams, built separately, covering different aspects of the same crimes. Derek's encryption trap only worked if you tried to open the USB files. My cloud backup had bypassed that entirely. Saskia's recordings couldn't be encrypted because Derek didn't know they existed until this moment. He'd been so focused on controlling the information he knew about, he'd never considered what might be happening outside his surveillance. How long had Saskia been recording before she told anyone? 6 months. Building her case quietly, while Derek thought she was under his control, waiting for the right moment to reveal she'd been documenting everything. Derek's voice cut through the darkness. "You think that matters? You think recordings and stolen files will—" He stopped, mid-sentence. Because we all heard it at the same time. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, not coming down the stairs toward us. Going up, Derek was climbing from the first floor to the second, not confronting us, not trying to take the evidence or stop what was happening, just leaving. Saskia and I stood in the kitchen, listening to his footsteps echo through the ceiling above us. "Why is he going up instead of down?" Saskia whispered. I knew this house, knew the layout. Second floor had the bedrooms, Marlene's office, the safe where Derek kept physical documents. Third floor was his private office, the place he conducted business he didn't want anyone else to see. "He's with Marlene," I said. "Or he's running," Saskia replied. But the footsteps didn't sound like running. They sounded measured, controlled. Derek wasn't fleeing, he was repositioning. Going somewhere he thought gave him an advantage, or going to get something he thought would shift the balance back in his favor. The footsteps stopped. We heard a door open, close. Second floor, master bedroom maybe, or Marlene's office. Then voices, too muffled to make out words, but the tone was clear. Derek and Marlene talking urgently. 2 people who'd been planning separate betrayals of each other, now forced to deal with a shared threat. I looked at Saskia in the dim light from our phone screens. "He's not running," I said quietly. "He's planning something." "What do we do?" she asked. I listened to the sounds from above, the house I'd built, the systems I'd designed, the manual overrides Derek had forgotten existed. "We wait," I said. "Let him think he has options, then we show him he doesn't." Above us, Derek's footsteps resumed, heavy, deliberate, moving towards something or someone, not running, not hiding, planning whatever he thought would save him now that 2 people with 6 months of evidence were standing in his kitchen at 3 in the morning. Whatever Derek thought would save him was happening on the second floor. Saskia and I moved to the base of the stairs, stood in the darkness listening. Derek's voice cut through from above, low, venomous. "You called her here." Marlene's response was quieter. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was steady, calm. Saskia looked at me. I nodded toward the stairs. We climbed, slowly, staying close to the wall where the steps wouldn't creak. Halfway up, we stopped, crouched in the shadow where the staircase turned. The second floor hallway stretched in front of us. Faint light from a window at the far end, street lamps 200 meters away, creating just enough illumination to see silhouettes. Derek and Marlene, standing 15 feet apart, facing each other like adversaries who'd been waiting for this moment. "You brought the accountant to my house," Derek said. His voice was different now, not the controlled CEO tone he'd used with me. This was raw, angry. "I didn't bring anyone," Marlene replied, still calm. "I simply didn't stop her." "Same thing." "No," Marlene said. "It's not." She took one step closer to him. Her silhouette shifted. I could see her posture, confident, like she'd been rehearsing this conversation for months. Section 7, subsection D of our prenuptial agreement, Marlene said. Have you read it lately? Derek didn't respond immediately. I could see his shape in the darkness perfectly still. Asset protection clause, he said finally. Marlene laughed, soft, cold. Asset co-ownership clause. I own half of everything in the Cayman entity. The shell company, the accounts, the insurance proceeds when they clear. Silence. I watched from the stairs as my son processed what his wife had just told him. You wrote that prenup, Derek said slowly. I'm an asset dispute attorney, Marlene replied. It's what I do. I signed it. You did, without independent legal review, because you trusted me. Another pause, longer this time. You've been planning this since we got engaged, Derek said. I've been planning this since you told me about your first problem client who needed to disappear, Marlene said. 3 months after we started dating, when you thought you were impressing me with how clever you were. My son had never seen it coming, built his entire fraud scheme, forged documents, planned murders, engineered elaborate traps, and his own wife had been building a trap around him the entire time, using his own tactics, his own methodical precision, his own confidence that he was smarter than everyone else. Beside me on the stairs, Saskia whispered, Should we? I shook my head, touched her arm, gestured to stay quiet. No, I whispered back. Watch. They're tearing each other apart, she said. I know, and I wanted them to. Wanted Derek to understand what it felt like to be betrayed by someone you'd trusted. Wanted Marlene to realize that playing games with a predator meant eventually becoming prey yourself. Let them destroy each other. Let them both understand that the traps they had built were cages they couldn't escape. How long had Marlene been waiting to reveal this? Since their engagement, since the wedding, since the day Derek told her about Preston Lockwood and she'd started planning how to steal everything he was stealing. Above us, Derek's silhouette shifted. He took a step toward Marlene. You think that prenup matters? His voice had changed again. Dangerous now. You think legal paperwork will protect you when everything collapses? I think, Marlene said, that I'll be the only one with access to the money when you're in federal prison. You'll be in prison too. Will I? Marlene's silhouette moved. She was reaching for something. I'm not on the insurance policy. I'm not on the hit list your father uploaded to the cloud. I'm just the attorney who drafted documents my client signed. Derek took another step toward her, aggressive posture, hands rising slightly. Don't, Marlene said sharply. Her hand moved to the handbag she'd been carrying. I'd seen it earlier when she'd come downstairs. Designer bag, the kind that costs more than most people's monthly rent. Her fingers found the clasp. Metallic click. Loud in the silent hallway. Sharp, distinct. Derek froze. His hands were half raised, 3 feet from Marlene, close enough to reach her in one step. But he didn't move. Marlene's hand stayed inside the open bag. I couldn't see what she was holding, just her silhouette, her stillness. Stay where you are, she said, voice steady, no fear. Derek didn't move, didn't speak. What's in the bag, Marlene? He asked finally. She didn't answer, just stood there, hand inside the handbag, looking at her husband across 3 feet of darkness in a house where all the power was dead, and all the cameras were blind, and all the systems they had both relied on had been systematically destroyed. Beside me, Saskia's breathing had gone quiet, shallow, like she was trying not to make any sound that might break whatever was happening in that hallway. I watched my son and his wife face each other, 2 predators who'd been circling each other for years, each one thinking they'd been the hunter, each one discovering they'd also been prey. The metallic click echoed in my memory. Weapon, recording device, legal documents, evidence. Whatever Marlene had brought to this confrontation, Derek believed it was dangerous enough to stop moving. No one spoke. No one moved. Just 4 people in a dark house at 3 in the morning. 2 of them had been planning murders. 2 of them had been gathering evidence. And somewhere in the next few seconds, everything was going to break. The metallic click was the last sound before the world split into before and after. Marlene pulled a black semi-automatic from her handbag barrel, leveled at Derek's chest. Her hand didn't shake. The muzzle didn't waver. This wasn't panic or impulse. This was rehearsed. Step back, she said, and her voice had gone flat emotionless. Both of you, against the wall. Derek's face went white. Marlene, what are you? Shut up. She pivoted slightly, adjusting her stance so the gun could cover both of us. You really thought I'd let you dissolve this marriage and walk away with half? That I'd spend the next decade in litigation while you bled the accounts dry? I raised my hand slowly, palms out. My mind was racing through options distance to the stairs angle of her aim, whether the safety was off. But none of it mattered. She had 15 feet of clear line of sight and a finger on the trigger. This wasn't about the prenup, I said quietly. Of course it wasn't. Marlene's smile was thin, surgical. The prenup was insurance. This is execution. Derek dies in a home invasion. His meddling father tries to intervene and gets shot too. Tragic. I'm the sole survivor, the traumatized widow. The estate transfers clean, no probate fight, no questions. Derek made a strangled sound. You've been planning to kill me since the engagement, darling. Her eyes didn't leave mine. The prenup co-ownership clause was never about protecting assets. It was about consolidating them. One bullet for you, one for your father, and I own it all. I felt Saskia tense beside me. She was 3 feet to my left, just outside Marlene's immediate cone of fire. Her phone was still in her hand from earlier. The cameras are off, Marlene continued. I disabled the app 20 minutes ago. Derek's security system won't record a thing. And the gun, she tilted her head, registered to me for home defense, purchased legally 6 months ago. When the police arrive, I'll be holding it legally. My heartbeat hammered in my ears, but my engineering brain was still working. We were standing in the second-floor hallway 10 feet from the main HVAC return duct. The ventilation system ran through the walls on a 15-second cycle. If I could time it right. You won't get away with this, Derek whispered. Marlene's laugh was cold. I already have. She started to squeeze the trigger. I slammed my fist into the wall panel next to the return duct. The impact triggered a resonance cascade. The hollow cavity between studs amplified the sound into a thunderous boom that echoed through the entire second floor. For one critical second, Marlene flinched her aim, jerking sideways. Saskia threw her phone. It hit Marlene's wrist with a crack. The gun swung wild. Derek lunged forward, hands reaching. Marlene pivoted, finger contracting. The gunshot was deafening. Plaster exploded from the ceiling. White dust rained down. Derek crashed into Marlene, but she twisted away faster than he was, stronger than he expected. The gun came back around toward his face. Saskia moved like a strike. She grabbed Marlene's wrist with both hands wrenched sideways and drove her knee into the back of Marlene's elbow. The joint hyperextended. Marlene screamed. The gun clattered to the hardwood. I kicked it down the hallway. Derek was on his knees gasping. Saskia had Marlene face down, arm locked behind her back. Marlene writhed, spitting curses, but Saskia's grip didn't budge. Zip ties, Saskia said calmly. Utility drawer, kitchen. I ran. By the time I got back, Saskia had Marlene's wrists pinned with one hand and was checking her for additional weapons with the other. I handed over the zip ties. Saskia secured Marlene's wrists in 4 seconds flat, then her ankles. You're done, Saskia said quietly. Marlene laughed high, unhinged. You think this changes anything? You assaulted me, disabled me. That's your word against mine, and I'm the one with the self-defense registration. No, Saskia said. It's your confession against the wire I've been wearing since this afternoon. Marlene went still. Saskia pulled her collar aside. A small black microphone was clipped to her bra strap, LED blinking green. Every word, Saskia said. Recorded and transmitted in real time. Derek stared. Transmitted to who? Saskia stood brushing plaster dust from her sleeves. I called the FBI 2 hours ago. Told them we had evidence of conspiracy to commit murder and financial fraud. They've been parked 3 blocks away waiting for probable cause. Marlene's face drained of color. I looked at Saskia, really looked. You knew she'd escalate. I knew she'd show her hand if we pushed hard enough. Saskia retrieved Marlene's gun from the hallway, ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber. The prenup was bait. The confrontation was theater, and Marlene just confessed to premeditated double homicide on a federal wire. Then I heard it. Tires on gravel, multiple vehicles. Headlights swept through the windows, blue and red, strobing across the walls. A loudspeaker crackled to life outside. FBI, exit the building with your hands visible, now. Derek looked at me, then at Saskia still holding Marlene's disassembled gun, then at the stairs leading down to the front door. Whoever walked out first would frame the entire narrative. And we had about 10 seconds to decide. I made the decision in 3 seconds. I'm coming out, I called through the door. Hands visible. Saskia Santos is behind me with the weapon she's carrying it by the barrel finger off the trigger. I descended the stairs, slowly palms, raised fingers, spread. Behind me, Saskia held Marlene's disassembled gun, vertically barrel pointed at the ceiling. Derek came last, hands up, face ashen. 4 black SUVs ringed the property, tactical lights flooding the facade until every window blazed white. 12 agents in FBI windbreakers formed a semicircle around the entrance, weapons drawn but lowered. At the center stood a man in his early 40s, clean-shaven tactical vest over a pressed dress shirt. His badge read, Ross. "A weapon on the ground," he said. His voice was calm, practiced. "Hands visible, all of you." "I'm placing it down now," Saskia said. She knelt, set the gun on the gravel, and stepped back with her hands raised. "Step back 3 paces." We complied. Ross gestured. 2 agents moved forward, secured the weapon in an evidence bag, photographed its position. The entire operation took 45 seconds. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Ross's eyes swept over the 3 of us, then locked on Marlene, still zip-tied, standing in the doorway behind Derek. "Marlene Prescott," he said. "I'm a former federal prosecutor." Marlene said, her voice sharp despite the restraints. "We know exactly who you are, Ms. Prescott." Ross nodded to 2 agents. They moved past us up the steps. One cut the zip ties. The other produced handcuffs. Marlene's eyes widened. "You can't—" "Marlene Prescott, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, wire fraud, and obstruction of justice." The agent recited Miranda with the same flat efficiency Ross had used to clear the scene. Marlene's wrists disappeared into steel cuffs. She was escorted to the nearest SUV, placed in the back seat. The door closed with a heavy thunk. Ross turned to Derek. "Derek Cole." Derek said nothing. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping beneath the skin. "Derek Cole, you're under arrest for wire fraud, insurance fraud, extortion, and conspiracy to commit fraud." Another agent stepped forward, more handcuffs. Derek's hands were pulled behind his back. As they walked him past me toward a second SUV, Derek's eyes met mine for one brief second. "This isn't over," he said quietly. Then he was gone, loaded into the vehicle, door closed. The SUV's tinted windows reflected nothing but tactical lights. I stood there watching my son placed in federal custody, the boy I'd raised, the engineer I'd trained to think in systems and logic and cause and effect, the man who'd forged my signature, stolen my wife's death benefit, and extorted me for 18 months. The handcuffs had closed around his wrists with a final irreversible click. Ross approached, hand clasped loosely in front of him. "Mr. Cole, Miss Santos, you're not under arrest, but I need you both to remain on site while we process the scene." "Understood," Saskia said. Ross glanced back toward the house. "We've been parked 2 blocks away since 2 a.m. I blinked. "You waited—" "Fourth Amendment," Ross said simply. "We can't enter a private residence without a warrant or exigent circumstances. Ms. Santos contacted us at 11 p.m. with evidence of ongoing fraud and a credible threat assessment. We responded, established a perimeter, and waited. If for what I asked. Imminent threat to life." Ross's expression didn't change. The wire Ms. Santos wore transmitted in real time. We heard the extortion. We heard the confrontation. But until Marlene Prescott drew a firearm and verbally articulated intent to commit murder, until we witnessed that, through the second-floor window, we had no legal authority to breach. Saskia exhaled slowly. "You saw her pull the gun." "Agent Diaz had a clear line of sight from the northeast perimeter," Ross confirmed. "The moment Ms. Prescott aimed a weapon and stated intent, we had exigent circumstances. Then we moved." Legal precision. They'd waited in the dark for nearly 3 hours, listening to every word, watching for the single moment that would grant them entry. Patience I couldn't have mustered. Discipline that felt almost inhuman. Behind us, 2 agents emerged from the house, carrying evidence bags. Marlene's handbag, the ceiling plaster, with the bullet embedded, Derek's laptop from the study. Ross gestured toward Saskia. "The recordings you mentioned on the call. Do you have them?" Saskia pulled her phone from her jacket. "May through October, 2022, every extortion call. Time-stamped, geotagged. Cloud backup uploaded at 2:04 a.m., I added. 847 files. Financial records, communications, asset transfers." Ross accepted Saskia's phone, handed it to a waiting agent. "Metadata intact on both." Unaltered, Saskia said. Ross nodded. We'll need formal statements from both of you. But the wire recording and the cloud files give us a prosecutable case even without testimony. How long had the FBI known before tonight? Had they been watching Derek for weeks, months, building evidence while I'd been building my own counterattack in parallel? The tactical team was pulling back, now returning to their vehicles. The lights dimmed. Only Ross remained standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets. He looked at me directly. Your son faces federal wire fraud, insurance fraud, and extortion charges. I know, I said quietly. And you're the primary victim. Ross's tone shifted slightly, less tactical, more human. Which means we need your full cooperation. Depositions, testimony, financial forensics. This case doesn't close without you. I felt the weight of it settle. Not vigilante, not architect of revenge, witness, victim, the man whose signature had been forged, whose grief had been weaponized, whose dead wife's memory had been turned into leverage. Ross extended his hand. I shook it. His grip was firm, professional. Behind him, the two SUVs holding Derek and Marlene, idled, exhaust visible in the cold pre-dawn air. Ross glanced back at them, then returned his gaze to me. There's more to this, he said quietly. He released my hand. We need to talk, inside. Ross gestured toward his SUV. Let's talk inside. The back seat was leather cold even through my jacket. Ross climbed in beside me, closed the door. The interior light clicked on harsh against my exhausted eyes. Outside, the tactical team was breaking down the perimeter. 50 feet away, Derek's SUV sat idling, my son's silhouette barely visible through tinted glass. Ross opened a laptop, angled it between us. 8 months is a long time to build a case. You said there's more than the insurance fraud, I said. Much more. Ross's fingers moved across the keyboard, pulling up files. Start with what you have. The cloud backup you uploaded at 2:04 a.m. Before Derek knew I was in the house, I confirmed. 847 files, financial records, asset transfers, communications, all metadata intact. Ross made a note. And Ms. Santos's recordings, May through October 2022, every extortion call. She kept a USB backup and the original phone files. Ross pulled a document from a folder beside the laptop, a federal evidence confirmation form. He filled in the timestamp, file count, custody chain. Then he slid it across to me with a pen. Sign here. Confirms you provided this evidence voluntarily, that it hasn't been altered or tampered with since creation. I read the form twice. Every line was precise, legal, irrevocable. My signature at the bottom would lock the evidence into the federal record. There would be no taking it back, no changing my mind, no protecting Derek from the consequences. I signed, my own handwriting steady, despite the exhaustion condemning my son to prison. Ross countersigned, dated it, placed it back in the folder. Clean chain of custody. That makes this prosecutable even without your testimony, though. We'll still need it. What about my entry into the house? I asked. I broke in, disabled his security. That's trespassing, breaking, and entering. Exigent circumstances, Ross said. He closed the laptop, slightly met my eyes. Washington state law permits warrantless entry when there's reasonable belief of imminent danger to life. You had credible evidence Derek was involved in fraud, possibly violence. Your grandsons were inside that house. I blinked. I didn't know Silas and Lark were there when I... Doesn't matter, Ross interrupted. Reasonable belief is the standard, not certainty. 2 children ages 8 and 6 in a home where their mother was planning double homicide. That's imminent threat to minors. Your entry is legally defensible. Relief washed through me, unexpected and dizzying. I hadn't realized how much I'd been bracing for arrest until Ross said I was clear. Marlene's gun was registered, Ross continued. Purchased legally 6 months ago under her own name. We have the transaction record, but intent overrides legality of possession. The moment she drew it with stated intent to kill, she crossed into attempted murder. He opened the laptop again, navigated to a new folder. Now, the part you don't know. Ross clicked on an image file. Preston Lockwood's face filled the screen. Older than I remembered, grayer at the temples lines, deeper around his eyes, but unmistakably, undeniably alive. He was holding a newspaper. I could read the date, November 12th, 2022, 2 days ago. Preston's alive. The words came out hoarse. Ross nodded. Protected witness since March 2022. He came to us first before the supposed hit and run. Told us Derek had approached him about faking financial audits, moving money offshore. Preston refused. Derek threatened him. So, Preston contacted the FBI. I stared at the photo. The hit list I'd found in Derek's files had said, completed July 2022. I'd believed my son had killed a man. We staged his death, Ross said quietly. Faked the accident, moved him into witness protection. Let Derek think the threat was neutralized. Then we waited. For what? For Derek to escalate. Ross closed the image, pulled up a timeline document. Wire fraud, insurance fraud, those are serious, but conspiracy to commit murder, that's 25 to life federal sentencing guidelines. We needed Derek to show his hand completely. Tonight, he did. Marlene did. You used me as bait, I said. Ross's expression didn't change. We didn't know you were conducting your own investigation until Ms. Santos called tonight. But yes, we let Derek operate freely knowing he'd eventually expose the full scope, and he did. I sat back against the cold leather. 8 months. The FBI had been watching Derek for 8 months while I'd been dismantling his accounts, gathering my own evidence, planning my own confrontation. 2 investigations running in parallel, neither aware of the other until tonight. Northgate Capital, I said. You mentioned a network. Ross nodded. 17 shell companies, offshore accounts in 3 countries. Derek wasn't working alone, he had partners. We're rolling them up, now starting with the arrests tonight. Headlights swept across the driveway. I turned. A sedan, not an SUV, not FBI marked, pulled in, slowly tires crunching on gravel. Civilian vehicle. It stopped near the entrance engine idling. I started. Ross glanced out the window. Your grandsons. Agent Diaz brought them over from my property 5 minutes ago. I had a colleague watching them while we held the perimeter. Social Services has been notified and will follow up within 72 hours for formal placement. My chest tightened. Through the sedan's windows, I could see 2 small silhouettes in the back seat. Child safety seats. One larger, one smaller. Both parents in federal custody. Both facing decades in prison. Silas and Lark had just become functionally orphaned. The sedan doors opened. A woman in a county social services jacket stepped out, moved to the back door. She opened it, carefully leaned in. 2 boys climbed out. Silas, first 8 years old, brown hair like Derek's, wearing pajama pants and a jacket pulled hastily over his shirt. Then Lark 6 smaller, clutching a stuffed animal I didn't recognize. Both of them looked sleepy, confused, squinting against the tactical lights still illuminating the property. They looked around at the FBI vehicles, at the agents at the house with its shattered front door lock and evidence tape already going up. Looking for their father, they saw only strangers and flashing lights. I stepped out of Ross's SUV. Silas Cole, 8 years old, climbed out of the sedan, wearing Transformers pajamas and a jacket zipped crooked. His eyes swept the chaos FBI vehicles, flashing lights, agents in tactical gear, then locked on me. He froze for half a second, then he ran. I dropped to my knees on the wet pavement and caught him. His arms wrapped around my neck, his face pressed into my shoulder. He didn't say anything, neither did I. Some reunions don't need words. Lark emerged more slowly, clutching a stuffed dinosaur thumb in his mouth. 6 years old, smaller than I, remembered eyes wide and uncertain. The social worker stepped forward. Mr. Cole, I'm Rachel Dunbar, King County Child Protective Services. The boys were with a neighbor when officers arrived. We explained their parents needed to speak with police and asked if there was family nearby. I stood keeping one hand on Silas's shoulder. Lark stepped closer, leaning against my leg. Where's Daddy? Lark asked, voice small. I knelt again eye level with both of them. Daddy is being looked after by the policeman. He has to stay with them for a while, but I'm here with you. I'm going to take care of you. Silas looked up at me, face pale. Can we go home with you, Grandpa? Yeah, I said. You can. Ross appeared beside us, handed Rachel Dunbar a clipboard. Emergency placement authorization. Grandfather has no criminal record existing relationship with the minors. Judge Kellerman signed off 20 minutes ago. Rachel nodded, made a note. I'll need to schedule a home visit within 72 hours. Understood, I said. Ross gestured back toward his SUV. One more thing. Walk with me? I glanced at the boys. Rachel Dunbar crouched beside them, asking gentle questions about their stuffed animals. I followed Ross. Inside the SUV, he pulled up a financial record on his laptop. Marlene executed an $18 million transfer to a Cayman account at 2:40 a.m. using her personal LTE cell connection, not the house network. The main power was dead, but her phone ran on its own battery and routed through a separate carrier. Derek's shutdown only killed the infrastructure he controlled. Her phone was entirely outside that system. I stared at the timestamp. While we were upstairs, before the gun. Exactly, Ross said. But Derek's system had a hidden security protocol. Any transfer over 5 million automatically logs credentials and sends a copy to the corporate attorney on record. Standard embezzlement protection. Except the attorney on record is an FBI collaborator. I felt a cold smile pull at my mouth. She signed her own confession, complete with IP address device, ID, and authentication codes. Ross confirmed. The Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty with the Cayman Islands has an emergency financial crimes provision. We froze the account within 24 hours. Standard MLAT takes months. This track is reserved for active criminal investigations with documented imminent flight risk. She moved the money, we caught it mid-flight, and she handed us airtight evidence of financial fraud. Perfect irony. Derek had built a trap into his own system to catch thieves, and his wife had walked straight into it. They trapped each other, I said quietly. Ross closed the laptop. They did, and we have everything we need to prosecute both. 4 months later, I sat in the back row of the U.S. District Court in Seattle. February 2023. The trial had taken 3 weeks, 16 federal charges against Derek wire fraud, 7 counts of money laundering, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, extortion, forgery. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. The foreman stood. On count 1 wire fraud, we find the defendant guilty. Count 2, guilty. Count 16, guilty. All 16, no exceptions. Derek sat at the defense table in a gray suit, hands folded, face expressionless. He never looked back at me, not once during the entire trial. I watched my son sentenced to 35 years in federal custody. The boy I'd taught to calculate load-bearing stress, to think in systems, to build things that lasted. Now, he'd spend 3.5 decades in prison, calculating nothing but time. No eligibility for parole. Marlene's trial concluded a week later. 11 charges, guilty on 9, 28 years federal. When did justice stop feeling like victory and start feeling like grief? In March, I met Saskia outside the FBI field office in Seattle. She looked lighter somehow, the tension that had been carved into her shoulders for months finally gone. Medical board voted to retain my license, she said, unanimously. I shook her hand. You earned it twice over. Preston's testimony made the difference, Saskia said. He explained the extortion timeline, the threats Derek made. The board classified my errors as actions under duress. Full exoneration. Grant Ross emerged from the building, handed Saskia an envelope. FBI commendation for cooperation. Goes in your file. If you ever need a reference, call me. Saskia took it, nodded. Thank you. She looked at me. What about you? What happens next? I thought of Silas and Lark living in my house, now sleeping in the guest bedrooms I'd converted with new furniture and nightlights. I rebuild, I said simply. August 2023. The family law office smelled like old carpet and stale coffee. The attorney slid papers across the desk. Shared guardianship arrangement. Both parties have agreed to joint custody. The children will split time between households, weekdays with you, weekends and summers with their mother. I looked up. Their mother, Derek's ex-wife, the attorney clarified, biological mother of both boys. She remarried 3 years ago, lives in Tacoma. She had no involvement in the criminal case and petitioned for shared custody last month. I hadn't expected that. I'd assumed I'd be raising them alone, but the boys had a mother, Derek's first wife, the woman he'd divorced years before Marlene. She had every right. And whatever's best for them, I said. The attorney nodded. She said the same thing. I signed the papers. Legal guardian, shared custody. Weekday mornings, making breakfast, helping with homework, driving to school. Building a life I hadn't planned, but would protect with everything I had left. Silas sat in the chair beside me, swinging his legs. He looked up as I set the pen down. Grandpa, he said, can we get a dog? I looked at him. 8 years old, brown eyes like Derek's. Asking about a dog, unaware his father wouldn't be eligible for release until Silas was well into his 40s. Unaware of the 35 years stretching ahead, the federal prison where Derek would spend the next 3 decades, the childhood visits that would be measured in hours behind glass. Unaware that I'd destroyed his father to save him. Yes, I said, we can get a dog. We got a golden retriever. Silas named him Murphy. 2 years later. Thanksgiving 2024. I set a roasted turkey on a table with no smart temperature sensors, no voice-activated dimmer switches, no automation of any kind. Just 4 plates, 4 chairs, and people who mattered. The rental house in suburban Seattle had manual light switches, a thermostat. I turned by hand locks that required actual keys. After decades building integrated systems, I'd chosen the simplest home I could find. No cameras, no algorithms, no encrypted logs tracking who entered and when. Just walls, a roof, and silence I could trust. Silas, 10 years old, now taller voice starting to crack, carried the mashed potatoes to the table with exaggerated care. Lark, 8 now, precise and deliberate as ever, followed with the rolls setting them down at the 2 o'clock position relative to the centerpiece exactly the way he'd seen me do it. I can change all the batteries in the smoke detectors now, Silas announced to Saskia, who was pouring water into glasses. Grandpa taught me. You take the cover off, check the voltage, replace both, even if only one is low. Lark looked up serious. And I know which door hinges need oil every 3 months. The bathroom squeaks if you don't. Saskia smiled. Sounds like you've got good teachers. Murphy circled the table, tail wagging, hoping someone would drop something. Silas nudged him gently toward his bed in the corner. The dog obeyed, flopping down with a contented sigh. I sliced the turkey. Steam rose, carrying the scent of rosemary and thyme. Simple, warm, real. I want the chair by the window, Lark said. I sat there last week, Silas countered. But I always sit by the window on holidays. And that's not a rule. I didn't turn from the carving board. Flip a coin. Loser gets first dessert. They flipped. Lark won the chair, Silas claimed the pie. The argument dissolved into negotiations over slice size. Normal, loud, chaotic in the way only children arguing over nothing could be. I stood at the counter, knife in hand, listening to them bicker. This was what peace sounded like. No gunshots, no federal raids, no encrypted files or offshore accounts, or brothers betraying each other in the dark. Just 2 boys fighting over a chair because it had a better view of the street where absolutely nothing interesting was happening. When did I stop measuring success in contracts signed and start measuring it in chairs, fought over batteries, changed hinges, oiled on schedule? We ate. Saskia asked the boys about school. Silas explained his science project, a model bridge load-tested with pennies. Lark described his art class painting of Murphy, which apparently looked more like a bear, but his teacher said it had emotional depth. After dinner, Saskia and I carried our coffee to the front porch. 2 wooden chairs, no cushions facing a quiet street, where the only lights were manual porch lamps and the occasional passing car. We sat without speaking for a long moment. Inside, the boys were loading the dishwasher, arguing again this time over the correct orientation for plates. Ever think about writing to him? Saskia asked quietly. She didn't need to specify who. Sometimes, I said. Then I realized I don't know what I'd say. Derek was in a federal facility in California, 33 years remaining on his sentence. I'd received 1 letter from him 6 months after sentencing. 3 sentences, no apology, just a request that I tell the boys he was working overseas. I hadn't replied. I taught him every wrench technique I knew, I said. Torque specifications, load calculations, how to sister a joist frame, a load-bearing wall rough in a circuit box. But how to be decent? I shook my head. There's no schematic for that. Saskia didn't offer platitudes. She didn't say it wasn't my fault, or that Derek made his own choices, or that some people can't be saved. She just sat holding her coffee, letting the silence settle. That was enough. The boys are good kids, she said eventually. They are. You're building something different with them. I thought about that. Silas and Lark spent weekdays with me, weekends and summers with their mother in Tacoma. Shared custody, shared responsibility. 2 households trying to give them stability after their father chose prison and their stepmother joined him there. I wasn't building structures anymore. I'd retired from contracting the year after the trial, sold the business, paid off, debts put the rest into accounts for the boys' education. What I was building now didn't have blueprints. My knees creaked when I stood 62 years old, older than I felt, most days younger than I felt others. I was building something with Silas and Lark, 1 lesson at a time, that might outlast the houses I'd framed and the systems I'd installed. Character, foundation, the kind you couldn't see but felt in every interaction. Grandpa Silas called from inside. "This chair is wobbly." I set my coffee down, walked into the living room. Silas pointed to the dining chair he'd won in the coin flip. I knelt joints protesting and checked the legs. One screw had worked loose. I pulled a screwdriver from the drawer beneath the TV, tightened the screw with 2 turns. Solid again. And just needed 1 turn, I said. Here, next time you do it. I handed him the screwdriver. Silas took it, carefully tested the weight, adjusted his grip the way I'd shown him, thumb along the side index finger pointing forward for control. Serious, focused. Like this, he asked. Exactly like that, I said. Lark appeared beside his brother watching. Murphy padded over, sat at their feet. I stood back. Silas held the screwdriver correctly, turning it slowly in the air, practicing the motion. This house wasn't smart. It didn't monitor his movements or log his progress or send alerts when maintenance was needed. But it was warm. It was full. It had 2 boys learning to fix what broke, to tighten what loosened, to maintain what mattered. And tonight, Thanksgiving 2024, 2 years after the raid, 33 years before Derek would walk free, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. And to you listening to my story, remember this family betrayal cuts deeper than any stranger's crime, but it doesn't have to define the rest of your life. I spent 40 years building structures, teaching my son everything I knew about engineering, but I missed the foundation that mattered most: character. I taught Derek how to calculate stress loads, but never stopped to ask if the pressure I put on him to succeed was too much. Don't make my mistake. Don't assume that competence equals integrity, or that silence means peace. When family betrayal strikes you, have 2 choices: let it destroy you, or let it teach you. I chose to fight back not with violence, but with evidence, patience, and the law. The hardest lesson. Sometimes justice means watching someone you love face consequences you helped bring about. But I believe God put me through this so I could raise Silas and Lark differently, teaching them not just skills, but values. Family betrayal doesn't end when the trial ends. It ends when you decide to build something new from what's left. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you faced family betrayal? How did you handle it? Please share this video with someone who might need to hear it. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe to Revenge Dad, because sometimes the best revenge is living well and teaching the next generation better. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time matters, and I don't take it for granted. One final note: certain details in this story have been fictionalized for storytelling purposes. What's real is the message, and I hope it stays with you.